It's time for a reality check. One that you desperately need. I've tried to tell you guys for weeks that the cracks were starting to show here with this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. But, you didn't want to listen. 'Cause you were too busy going... I ain't lying! I'm gonna show you right here and right now that I've been with Resident Evil since Resident Evil 7. Look at what I have here. Nothing. No. Wrong. I have Fortnite. Well, here's the thing. I'm trying to help people from coming away from GameStop being disappointed with this all-new edition of Fortnite. You know, if you want to go out and waste your hard-earned money on this, then go ahead and do that. That's all you do. Brain dead. This game is for normies. And now we're learning about stuff that has been cut. Classic, iconic enemy types have been thrown out of this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2, including the Fortnite crowd. Millennial devs working at Capcom today. Zombies! Bullet sponge zombies. You know why they've been cut? So they've cut these classic, iconic enemy types out of the game. And yet you're supposed to be satisfied. And it's gonna get great scores. Because it's for the normies. It's for those who love Fortnite. They love to just turn off their brain and go... That's what you do day in and day out as you're playing Fortnite, buying them V-Bucks. And now you're so bored of Fortnite, you went over to this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2 here, and I'm going to tell you something right here right now. This game is nothing more than Fortnite. This isn't Resident Evil. It's more reminiscent of Fortnite than it is Resident Evil 2. I've canceled my review because I'm playing Fortnite, buying them V-Bucks. And I know you're going to sit there and say, well, Michael, no one cared about your review. Then why are you here? You don't care. There's nothing but shit on the bottom of my shoe.
You know, I'm wondering with Resident Evil 2, could they use this as an opportunity to potentially tease a
Resident Evil 7
remake? I know I've talked about it a little bit before here on my channel, but if you're new here, let's dive back into that subject and try and figure out if Capcom is really kind of willing to pull my just a tad bit more.
There are so many fake gamers here on YouTube that use games as a vehicle to push their channel, to get more clicks, therefore more money. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm not just going to tell you, I'm going to show you. So let's head on over to the PS4, because it's time to get started. You are wrong about
this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2 that caters to the Fortnite crowd. And bro, I'm about to show you something that is gonna knock your socks off. And I know you guys are gonna come away from this and say, oh Michael, no one cares. Well, I'm stupid. Take a look at this. We continue along here and look at the great all-new edition of Resident Evil 2.
Is this really what you were clamoring for? Mood, the vibe, the atmosphere, the tension, the edge of your seat type gameplay, because we now have Fortnite. Because they knew, regardless of what they've done here, the old school Fortnite audience is going to be there day one. So there's no need to go after them when they're already going to be here with this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. And I hope you guys are satisfied. But ultimately, what I think needs to be done right now is I think you really do need to take a second look at this game, because so many of you are under the impression that you think you know what this is, when in reality, again, we need to reiterate, you know what this is. This is a remake that made sense. It stays close to the source material. You can disagree until the cows come home. I couldn't care less. It's essentially Resident Evil 2. That's what this is. It wasn't what we were clamoring for. It was really what we were asking for, and we can take it or leave it. But I'll tell you something right here and right now. Take it.
It's a remake. It doesn't matter how many times you sit there and say that it's not. That doesn't make it true. And just because you disagree with me, it doesn't mean that you're right. It's a remake. And like I've said in previous videos, it's an all-new Fortnite
And that's why so many of you are excited about this, because you sit there and you play Fortnite day in and day out. And you've never played a real Fortnite Evil game before, outside of Fortnite Evil 7. And now you're moving on to Resident Evil 2, and you're trying to like come across as this real Resident Evil fan. It's like, oh yeah, I've been there since day one. No, you haven't. Oh, Michael, you have no idea what you're talking about. Really? I mean, you guys are really, honestly, going to be surprised. When you play this game in just a couple of weeks, you're going to be surprised. And in a good way. But look, if it comes to that, guess what? You have only yourself to blame. You do. Because you didn't want to listen. This is a remake. Stayed true to the source material, but at the same time added in new stuff to spicing up the experience a tad bit, to modernize it in a way that made sense. You look at what they've done here in this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2, it's like the same. The money is with the Fortnite audience, the younger audience. So what did Capcom do? Well, they decided to do this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2 and make sure that the old school fans are going to be there day one. They know the Fortnite audience is going to be there day one. Pre-order this thing right now. But let me tell you something right here, right now. As a fan who was clamoring for a remake that made sense, that found balance, they can take this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. And honestly, folks, pre-order this thing right now.
It shouldn't take them too much time to really do a
Resident Evil 7
reimagining after Resident Evil 2. They can just reuse some assets from Resident Evil 2, and plus they're on that Resident Evil engine, which kind of speeds things up. I think that was one of the ideas of the Resident Evil engine, is that, hey, look, we can do this quicker now because of the assets but that we have from this engine.
It's so sad. It really is, because you can't sit down for yourself and come to your own opinion about this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. Oh no, you want to have these influencers and these critics think for you. Let Michael think for you. Oh, Michael, you don't know what you're talking about. No, you... The honeymoon phase is over, folks, with this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2. You are going to come away from this all-new edition of Resident Evil 2, and you're going to sit there and say, man, this survival horror game was great. No, it doesn't matter, okay? Let Michael think for you. Really, why did I waste my hard-earned time on Justin Bieber? Maybe I should have listened to Michael. No. Wrong. No one wants to listen to Michael. I don't know what I'm talking about. You're like a all-new edition of Zaz. But look, when you come away, and it's going to happen, folks, that all-new edition of honeymoon phase is going to dissipate sooner rather than later. And you're complaining about aching all over because you had your fun in Resident Evil 2. Guess what? You have only yourself to blame. Because you didn't want to listen. You need a reality check. Because without that original game, Resident Evil 1998, from we wouldn't be here today, folks, talking about Michael, period. You sound like a broken record. Yeah, I do, and I don't care. All new edition of Resident Evil 2. All new edition of Resident 2. All new edition of Resident Evil 2.
Okay. If Resident Evil 2 sells like hotcakes, which I think it will, basically what they're saying is if Resident Evil 2 sells like Resident Evil, when they are welcoming the idea of doing something with more, but